But now English teachers have decided that their exams are upholding whiteness. They claim that the exam boards awarded points to students for using phrases such as white is beautiful, which therefore upholds white privilege and fragility. So joining me now in the studio is Janella Ajeigbe, who's a senior educational consultant and also a representative for Don't Divide Us. Janella, everyone. So what is exactly happening here? What claim is being made about these exam boards?
OK, so the example that's being discussed is based on a story written at the start of the 20th century about a girl who works in a shop and she sees someone come in who is beautiful.
Yes.
Now, that beautiful person has red hair, green eyes and white skin.
Right.
So in the exam, the children are asked to describe how the beautiful person has been described in the story.
I see.
It's not asking the children, what do you think is beautiful, or what do you think society should think is beautiful, or how have concepts of beauty changed?
Yes.
It's just asking how, or I think it is just asking,
yes,
how did the author describe the beautiful girl in the story?
I see.
And so to answer that, you're going to need to write, the author said that the girl had red hair, the author said that the girl had white skin, the author said that the girl had green eyes.
Yes.
Because that's what's in the story.
So it's just a matter of showing that you can interpret the story and what the author was trying to achieve.
Right, you can understand.
So this is very much about a specific exam text that has caused this. But I've also read in the piece about this that there have been accusations that this is a broader problem across the board, that whiteness is something that we need to bring into, or the concept of whiteness should be taught to children. What is your understanding of that concept?
I think we need to have a sort of common agreement on what we mean by teaching literature.
Right.
So I have taught in schools for 20 years, 21 years this year. And for me, literature was a conversation, it is a conversation with an author to understand their ideas about a topic, even if the author is dead. When we present a book or a story or an essay to a child, we are helping them to understand what was written so that they can interact with, talk with somebody who is not there with them. Just through the words that they have left behind, we can understand somebody else.
Yes.
Now, it's really important, I think, for children to be reading stories, whether it's Shakespeare, Chaucer, Austen, whoever it is, reading the stories and understanding them correctly.
Yes.
So if in that original story by Catherine Mansfield, the child reading it hadn't understood that the girl who works in the shop thought the other girl was beautiful, you'd want the teacher to correct that.
Yes.
It's a misunderstanding.
Yes.
But after they've understood the story, you want the child to come up with their own opinion.
Yes.
And this is an exam for teenagers. It's a GCSE exam. And teenagers, I've never found they have a problem with coming up with their own opinion.
No, certainly not.
No, but what you don't want is the teacher to give them the opinion first. I think that is very different.
Yes, absolutely.
Very different. To be telling them that this story represents this. This story is saying these things. That is very different.
Well, you'll know that for a long time in universities, the study of English literature has come down to sort of saying, well, these authors are old white males trying to reassert white heterosexual patriarchy and all of that kind of thing. But that kind of does a disservice to what writers are doing, doesn't it?
It really upsets me deeply because I think when I have shared stories, especially look at what's happening in Ukraine, when I've shared stories with children of the Iliad, for example, even in translations to children, the moment when Hector's father begs for his son's body to be released to him, all of the children are still and they're moved because they are understanding from that story something that's common about all of our humanity.
Yes.
Whether you were alive and listening to that story being told in ancient Greece or you are reading it in a children's version aged 8.
Yes.
There is something common between all of us that is beyond, that's deeper than just the individual experience that I have.
Yes.
Something that brings us together over these stories. That's why they've lasted.
And yet some people would say, but surely, I mean, I've heard it said that young black students, for instance, can't engage with Shakespeare because he's a white man.
Even with this story, I think there is something about somebody in a university assuming what reaction a teenager will take from this story. Because
Yeah.
when I read it, I thought this is a very relevant story, but not because of what is or isn't beautiful. It's actually because the story asks a question that teenagers are often
Yes.
asking, which is, why is she considered so beautiful?
Yes.
That's what that story is asking. And you want teenagers to interact with that idea and discuss it. And then maybe some of them will come up with some interesting ideas of their own, and you might want to fill in some of those ideas, but you don't need to give them,
Yes.
I don't think,
Do you-
a reaction before they read it.
Why do you think, I mean, a lot of this seems very voguish at the moment, this idea, and there have been a lot of concerns about the idea of what they call critical race theory coming into schools and basically hyper-racialising everything, so that in effect you have to read everything through the lens of race, first and foremost. Why do you think that's happening at the moment?
I can't explain it because it's so different from what literature should be about. This idea that there are common things between all people that we share, regardless of whether or not our ethnicity or the level of melanin connects us to the writer or not.
Yes.
That's not what you share with the writer. It's this common idea about humanity.
I suppose
you
can understand why sometimes, if it's a book which is about issues specifically about race or a play about race, you will want to engage with those issues. That's absolutely important. If you're reading something like A Passage to India, you want to talk about the empire and the effect and the relationship between the white the English people there and the Indian people there. You know, so that's all valid, right? But isn't the point that if you only think of those terms, you are sort of denuding literature of much of its power?
I think it's a way that unfortunately simplifies what's happening in many books, because the understanding of the book does need children to understand the history of what's happening in the book, but understanding it through a lens of this is about race, this is about empire. For me, that is one reaction to the book. I reread Kipling and The Jungle Book last year, and of course, when you reread Kipling today, there are things in it that you might not write if you were writing today.
Of course.
But the first step is to understand what he has written and to connect with him, with his story. And actually, some of the things that he expresses just in the story of Mowgli are so emotional that that's the most important thing, I think, for a child to understand.
Do you think there's much debate going on among teachers that pushes back against this kind of hyper-racialisation? Because at the moment I'm getting the sense that it's just being imposed and teachers, by and large, are just going along with it, I suppose, for an easy life, right?
I think that's the saddest part of it, because my understanding has always been that we seek to understand the text that we're reading because we already know we are not going to agree with every text that we read.
Yes.
But we seek to understand them.
Yes.
But for a number of people who are pushing this discussion that should everything that's written before 1997 should be understood through a lens of race, don't accept the idea that some people don't feel that race is what they want to focus on when reading this story.
Well, I imagine this conversation is going to go on and on, I imagine. So, Janella Ajeigbe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.